Hello everybody, it is January 3rd, 2018. I was going to do a new comic haul video today, but unfortunately all the books are delayed getting to the comic shops in my area just because of the weather where I am. So it's going to be a video I've been thinking about doing for a while. I've been wanting to do this one for a while. It's how to properly store your comics. I'm also going to talk about a good way of displaying your comics as well, so stay tuned. That'll come later in the video. But to start with, I've had people ask me over the years, what's the best bags and boards to use? Where do you store them? Where should I not store them? That type of thing. So those are kind of the questions I'm going to answer, or try to answer in this anyways. Hopefully, if you have any questions after this video, if I forget something, just send me a comment and I'll try and answer it for you. But anyways, one of the main things before you even consider a bag and a board, what type of bag and board to use, is where are you going to store them. Honestly, in my opinion, that has the biggest effect on the life expectancy and the condition of your books over the years. A lot of books that are worth money are, in like Silver Age, Bronze Age, you're looking at 40, 50 plus years in age now on those books. And if they're stored properly, they will last for quite a long time. You can take a new book today, throw it up in your attic, where it can be exposed to a ton of heat changes and moisture content, and that book may look like shit in 5 years. So there's some things to think about. So where I store my books, I store them in my basement, but I have a finished heated basement. It's not a below ground basement. It is I'm on a hill, so it's like a walkout basement. But it's dry, it's cool, and it's dark. Those are the three keys: dry, cool, and dark, for preserving your comics. That doesn't matter what. I would rather see somebody use the cheapest poly bag they can and the cheapest backing board stored in a dark, dry, and cool place over somebody putting in the most expensive Mylar bags and archival backer boards and then throwing it up in the attic where it's going to get a ton of heat and moisture and temperature fluctuations, which will really damage your book over the years. So don't stress too much. Before we get into this, make sure you do what you can afford. Don't go crazy trying to buy all the best bags and boards if you can't afford it. These bags here, these poly bags, I've used these for a ton of years. And I'll give you an example. This is from July of '81. This is Kazar, and I stored it properly. It didn't have obviously a backer board. The tape is yellowed on the back, and it's funny how you can see, I don't know if it's showing up, but the bags get really wrinkled and they get a real distinct smell over the time. Anybody who's bought an older book or whatever, but the book itself is actually in pretty good shape. You can see it's still fairly white. I'll take it out in a little bit. I'll put that one in. I'll show you how I actually bag them once I get to that point. But my point is, obviously bag and board your comics, but store them in a dark, dry, and cool location, and you know what? You'll get years and years out of your books. The pages will stay nice and white. A lot of reasons why the page is yellow is actually because of the heat. And they will, if you have a white cover, you'll find they start to yellow or they'll brown over time. If you get a lot of really high heat, like people throw them in attics and stuff, that's one of the worst places to store them. So don't store them in an attic. Don't store them in your garage where they're exposed to a lot of moisture and temperature changes as well. Try to find a room in your house that, like a closet, if that's what you got, put them in your closet, keep them in a box. Try to make sure the room is somewhat climate controlled. If you got air conditioning, great. But find a location that's dark, dry, and cool. So that's number one. My more valuable books, I'm still going to talk about where I store them first. My more valuable books, in my basement, I have a very large waterproof, fireproof safe. Now, one of the things you want to do if you're going to store them in a safe is make sure you put a dehumidifier in there, because over time it will collect moisture in there and that can rust your staples and whatnot. So make sure you buy a dehumidifier, and buy one that's bigger or rated for the area, bigger than the area you're doing. Just gives you a little better control of the humidity in there. Again, don't store your boxes right directly on concrete flooring. Concrete is porous, and over time it will absorb, the boxes will absorb moisture through the floor, so don't store them on the floor. And just I use the small boxes or short boxes. I don't like the long ones. They get way too heavy over time. I'll talk about the boxes after I show you what I'm doing with boards here. But anyways, let's get into bags. So that's a couple things to just think about. Location, basically. Out of all that, location is a big one. Dark, dry, and cool. So we got some Ultra Pro. I use Silver Age bags for all my books. Obviously, if they're Golden Age books, I would use Golden Age bags, but whether it's a Silver Age, Bronze Age, Copper Age, Modern Age, I use Silver Age bags and boards. I like having the bit of white around the edge. I'll show you one of my newer ones here. So I like having the little bit of, I just like the look of that. It looks better, and I also think it keeps. I'm not worrying about the corners at all, because it's nice thing with the I'll get into it with Mylar, but nice thing about the Mylar bags is they're a lot stiffer than your poly bags. Now a comic in a poly bag is going to drop. This doesn't have a backer board, but it's going to drop right down to the bottom, where the Mylar is going to keep it raised up a little bit. And I know you might not think too much about that, but you got to remember, when these are sitting in a box and you're moving the box around, you're flipping through those, if this corner, I bought books from people, and this top left corner, top right corner, the spine is beautiful, all the edges are beautiful, and then you get this bottom corner here, there's a little bit of blunting on it. That can be right from when they bought it, it was dropped on the shelf. But also storing them in your boxes, if you got your box and you're constantly moving this thing around, not constantly, but when you do move it around and stuff, and if that bottom corner is sitting on the bottom of the box, it can get damaged. So I really like using the Mylar bags. I think they're obviously a way better for the length of the comic. You don't have to change these out like you do with the poly bags. The poly bags, people say every 7 to 10 years. I don't know. This one's been in for almost over 30 years, and it's, it's wrinkled and whatnot. But anyways, poly bags, they're inexpensive. Where I am, these are about $10 for 100 bags. The boards are, I don't know, $9 kind of range. So you're looking at, with tax and everything, roughly $20 for 100 bags, 100 boards. The Mylar bags are quite a bit more expensive. The backer boards aren't too much more for the halfbacks or the fullbacks. Currently I'm using halfbacks, but I would recommend going fullbacks. I'm going to go fullbacks my next batch I buy. I just find the halfbacks are a little too thin, and I'm having to double up, so I might as well just go fullbacks. So for these, you're looking about $10, $11 for those, so they're a little bit more, but not much. And the Mylar bags is where you're going to pay more money. These are, I order them in bulk, and I get them for about $16 for 50, so it ends up costing me about $32. That's Canada for 100. So that's backer boards, and 100 bags is going to be roughly $40. So it's at least double the price, probably a little more than double the price of the poly bags. And if you get good quality poly bags, like I say, and you're storing them in a good location, you'll be fine. But if you want, I like using the Mylites. I think I don't have to worry about changing them out down the road. I can afford it, and I think it gives me better protection. So anyways, that's bags and the boards. Once I put my comic in the bag, I place a little label on the back of each book. Obviously, name of it, issue number, any first appearances, key information, what is first print, second print, and the cover date. I use archival quality pens. These are acid-free pens with ink. I just use regular Scotch tape. So in some of my boxes, I do use the plastic dividers as well. It just makes it easier for displaying your books. So I'm just going to reposition the camera here, and then I'll be right back, so hold tight. Okay, everybody, I'm back here. Just had to move stuff around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this old Kazar out of this poly bag from 30 plus years ago, and I got an extra. It's an old Mylar I was using for something else, so I'll use that one. Before we get into that, I just want to talk about the boards. So these are E. Gerber halfbacks. These are archival quality backer boards. The nice thing about these is these are, so if you read here, is produced with a 3% alkaline buffer throughout and maintain pH of 8+ to further ensure preservation of your collectibles. So like it says, it's throughout the whole board you're looking at a 3% alkaline buffer. Where the cheaper boards, they have a shiny side and a kind of a dull side. The shiny side is sprayed with the buffer, so it's basically coated. They spray the one side of the board with the buffer. The other side is not. So these boards are not 3% alkaline all the way through. Make sure if you're putting your comic, this is a question I get asked a fair amount, don't put it on the dull side. Make sure you put it on the shiny side, because the shiny side is the side with the buffer, so you want your comic on it, on that side like that, and then you place that in your bag. Don't place these in the middle of your book. The one side is protected, the other side isn't. I've seen people that do that, and you know, they pull the board out years later, and you can see all the ink from the comic is all over the one side that isn't got the buffer on it. So there, you just damage your comic. And honestly, I never put a board inside my comic. That's one question I asked too. I always put them in a bag like this with my backer board. It gets a label on the back, taped shut, and in my box it goes. So that's all I do with that. Anyway, I just want to point that out. Another thing too, if you buy these E. Gerber boards, you're going to notice they look quite a bit. They're quite a bit different. They've almost got a slight roughness to them, and they're quite a bit duller than these ones, and that's normal. They almost look like the back side of the cheaper board that doesn't have the spray on it. I don't know if that's showing up, but that's the way they're supposed to be. But these are good quality boards. So, anyways, just want to point that out. So what I do when I'm going to put a comic into a bag is I get my bag. I have the flap side up on the top. I have my backer boards ready. I'm going to take my comic out of this. Another point too, another tip I want to show you: if you're taking a comic out of a comic bag and it's got tape on it, and make sure one of two things: you either remove the tape from the flap, because if you don't, when you pull this comic out, I'm sure a lot of people have pointed this out, but when you pull this out, this tape can catch on the cover and pull some of the ink off and ruin your comics. If you got an old valuable comic, that's one of the worst things to do. So either peel this tape right off the top, or if not, if you can't, like this one's pretty old, I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to fold it down and stick it on there before I pull this out. I don't have to worry about it coming out. So, and if you can see that bag over time, how see how that gets all wrinkled? Looks pretty terrible. So anyways, what I do is I put my comic on the book, on the backer board. It's a little more difficult because I have to double these up, but throw it on there. Now, I hope this is showing up okay. I leave a little more space at the bottom than the top, and I try not to stick my thumb right on like I'm doing, but try to just barely touch. And I wash my hands before I handle any comics, or I will wear, if it's a valuable book, I'll wear the cotton gloves. I really don't like wearing the cotton gloves. They suck when you're trying to handle the book, but I wash my hands right before, so they're nice and dry, and oils and sweat and stuff on them. Center the book, grab your bag, fold the top flap up, slide one corner in, slide the other corner in, slide it all the way down. There you go. Grab your tape. Now I like to put, what I do is I fold it over and I give it a little push because I like it nice and snug in there. And then I will put one piece of tape across like this. Some people don't like doing that. Some people will, and then what I do is I fold my tape, I fold a little flap over. That gives you a little pull tab when you want to take it out down the road, if you want to take it out. Put one on one side. Same thing, fold it over. So that's how I finish off. Now I put this one here because I like to be able to pull that tight and put that down, and I put those two to keep the sides down. And also these are easy. Now if you want to take this out, you just grab this little thing and you peel it off. Once I put my bags, I'm not somebody who's putting them in a bag and then a month later taking them out and reading them, putting them back, and a month later taking it out, reading it again. I'll read, if it's a key book, I'll usually buy multiple copies and I'll read one, and once I've read it, that will go in a bag and be sealed up as well. But I'm not somebody who's taking these out constantly, so once it's in the bag, it stays in the bag, and I like to make sure it's sealed properly. So then I would get my label, Put my label on there, like I showed you here, and it has the name, the number, sometimes a title or first appearance and cover date. So that is how I bag and board my comics. The Mylar bags, the nice thing with them, like I was saying, is these will last. They're archival quality, so they will last. 30 years from now, that bag is going to look the same as it is. Where the poly bag gets all wrinkled and yellowed and smells, and it will absorb moisture and acids and stuff over the time, where these Mylar bags won't. So they are worth the money, but again, if you can't afford those, don't go crazy and do something you can't afford. If you can't afford it, don't do that. That's fine. Next thing I'm going to do is show you how I organize my books in the box. And so I just got to shut this off and reposition. I'll be right back. Alright everybody, I'm back. I just want to show you real quick. Once you got your comics bagged, boarded, you've got your short box, you've got your dividers labeled so you know what's going where. I used to store my comics all in one direction. So I would put one book this way, then the next book that way, and the next book. But over the length of the box, what happens is they start nice and flat, but then they start angling like this all the way down your box. So what I do is I will take one comic. My first comic goes in with the backer board. Then the next comic goes in, then in that way. So I hope that's showing up okay. But yeah, I put one facing one way, and then the spine will be on the opposite side. And the reason I do that, I saw on YouTube a guy doing that, and I really liked it, and I've kept doing it since then, is it keeps everything nice and flat in my box, inside the comic box. And I find over time, if you have all the spines on the one side of the box, and you really jam them in, that puts a lot of pressure on the spines, and that I haven't done any studies on it, but from what this guy I was talking to was saying, and makes sense, is it could cause some spine roll, just because there's so much pressure on the spines, and some of them could be squished off. So this way, I don't know, it just evens up the pressure. That's the way I like doing it. It keeps it nice and straight in the box, and I like to, that's how I do it. So I also put, one thing I'm going to recommend is put some, get some backer boards. I put like 4 or 5 at either end of the box, because inside the box there's the end wall, and there's another flap that comes up about halfway, so there's this little lip, and that comic at the end could tend to bend over on either side. So put some backer boards at the end before you put your first comic in. Just gives a nice flat surface to sit against. Anyways, that's how I store my books. And give me 2 seconds. I'm going to show you a good way of displaying your books. All right, everybody. So as I mentioned earlier, displaying your books, or obviously one of the key things about preserving your books is keep them dark, dry, and cool. So if you take your book, and I've seen a lot of people do this, they'll hang them up on the wall. They'll either pin sometimes they'll clip the bag to the wall, or they'll pin it to the wall, or they'll put it in a frame and they'll stick it up on the wall or whatever. The problem with doing that is over time UV light will fade the colors in your book, and then that decreases the value of it. And if you're okay with that, hey, you know what, then keep doing that. But one thing I do, in my office, I have access to Photoshop, a scanner and a printer and a laminator. So what I do is I take my comic book, the books I'm interested in putting out displaying, I take them in, I will scan the image into my computer as a TIFF file format. The reason for that, it's a lossless file format if you know anything about computers. JPEG is a common file format, but that is it's called a lossy file format. So that means when the image is saved, it will actually remove some pixels from the image, so it actually is not quite as clear of an image. So use a TIFF file format at the end of the day if you're going to scan it in. Once you scan it in, you now have the image in your computer. Then I print it out life size. I then will laminate it, and then once I've got my comic book printed out and laminated, I can stick it up on the wall, and then I get to look at my book, and I don't have to worry about it fading or getting damaged. So you can stick those inside a picture frame if you want. I just tape them up on my wall in my I've got a room upstairs. I do. It looks really good. They're all on the wall. Another thing you can do, so that's a really good way of displaying your books. So if you don't have access to a laminator, that gets a little tough. My boss doesn't mind me printing out the images, but I have to buy my own laminating sheets just because they get pretty pricey. And I'd recommend using the 5mm sheets because the 3mm sheets are a little thin and they get a little wrinkled over time, where the 5mm are a little thicker and they stay a little more rigid. So I think it looks really good, and it's a good way of doing it. So another thing, and because I scan them in, I have the image and access to Photoshop. What I do is I will, I got my iPhone 7 Plus here, and I like having different covers that I put on my phone. So I got my phone. I've got a cheap clear cover, which is, I think it was $10, $15 or something. It's flexible, whatever. Those same images that I scanned into my computer, I will put in Photoshop again. I'll reduce it down to about 50% size. You'll have to play with it to get the right size. But then you take that image, you put it inside your cover, slide it back on your phone, and now you've got a whatever comic book you want. If you get tired of that one, take that one out and put a different one in there. So I've done that several times, and I think it's, I love my comics. So, and then obviously you've got the image there, so you can, hang on a second here, get all this crap off my phone. I use it as a screensaver for my phone as well. Sorry, I should have been more prepared here, guys, but yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I've got my Spider-Man 792 variant, which that's one of the best covers I've seen in a long time. So yeah, it's a cool way to do it. You can, like I say, you can scan them in, you can print them out, laminate them, stick them on your wall. You don't have to worry about damaging your comics. Whether it's, I do it with all my books. All my graded books, I will scan them in as well. And I printed some of them out. They obviously have to be on a legal size paper. This is just letter size. But a good thing with doing that is you have a record, because every graded book has a serial number on it. It's a good way to record all your more valuable books as well, just for if you ever get broken into or something. But anyways, there's a few ideas as far as displaying your books. And if you got any questions, hopefully I covered everything off. I don't know, I was kind of rambling there, but appreciate you watching. And if you have any questions, send me a comment and I'll try and answer it for you. But Mylar bags, backer boards are great. If you can't afford that, use a good quality poly bag. Store it in a dark, dry, and cool place. You're good to go. Take care. Bye.